spaghetti tampons. What a classic. What a classic. Phil, mattresses out of the campground. What do we got? Flour? Did you say? Oh, like the baking flour. Thinking like a pretty flour. All right, all the way in the back, old man. That's pretty brutal. So if you learned anything, do not get in a prank war with Eric, because it sounds like Eric is going to win that prank war. So part of going to like a summer camp, pranks almost always happen. It's kind of just part of it. You know, sometimes you make a truce right away, and so you don't want it to happen, but ultimately, a lot of times, it happens. I remember one time when I was in high school, we got a prank war going between the guys and the girls for a little bit. About 7 or 8 pranks in, it started to be guys against guys. So all the guys were pranking each other. Everybody was in the same cabin. And then something happened. It went a little bit too far. And so you know how some people will keep a cup to keep their toothbrush in, like just to store it in, like on the sink? Well, somebody peed in the cup, turned the toothbrush over, and soaked the toothbrush in their pee. Well, that toothbrush happened to be the youth leader who was on the trip, and it was not very good. All the guys got chewed out really bad. Because urine in your toothbrush when you go to brush your teeth is pretty disgusting. Now pranks can be a whole lot of fun, but it can also be something that goes way too far. And sometimes, because of a prank, maybe you hold a grudge against somebody. Maybe you're like, wow, they got that thing to go way too far. I know that the youth leader who this happened to was pretty upset with a specific student for quite some time because he had to brush his teeth with a pea toothbrush. Now, sometimes we hold a grudge because it's something like a prank. But sometimes we hold a grudge because of something that's more important. I mean, it could be something like, you know, it's a Friday night. You decide, you know, you're going to stay in. No one's really texted you or anything, so you're staying in. You lay down on the couch, getting ready to watch some TV, got some dinner or something, and then you're checking Snapchat, and you're like, well, that friend's at the football game, and that friend's at the football game, and they're all sitting together. There's like 8 of them together. Why didn't anybody ever text me and invite me? Maybe it's something that you're mad at your parents for. I think you can get pretty upset with your family and hold a grudge against your family at times. Maybe it's because your parents won't let you go somewhere. Maybe it's one of your siblings. Maybe they ruined your favorite shirt. Maybe it's something else like you are the oldest, and so you have to be the free Uber for your younger siblings all the time, and you just want to stop driving them places. And if we're honest, sometimes that bitterness that we feel because of a prank or because of FOMO, sometimes being upset with somebody and them not knowing can feel a little bit good, right? Sometimes bitterness feels like a good thing. So I want to ask you, what do you do with the worst stuff that happens to you? Especially when you can't stop it. Typically, when you're a child, it goes something like this. Maybe a little kid does something mean to another little kid. So an adult comes over and says, all right, say you're sorry. The little kid half-heartedly says, I'm sorry. And then, you know, you guys are best friends again, right? Did you have those as a kid, like your best friend, where they push you on the play set or something really simple? They said a half-hearted sorry. Everything's good, right? Well, once you get a little bit older, it's a lot harder to forgive that easily. Now, normally it's not because one of your friends pushed you on the play set. It's because of something a little bit more serious. And so all of a sudden, it gets harder to forgive people. And so that bitterness sits in your heart. Now, I bet you're not surprised, but bitterness is not a new concept. It wasn't like all of a sudden you guys are in high school and so bitterness is something that's brand new. No one's ever experienced it before. People have been experiencing bitterness since the beginning of human existence. Bitterness has always been around. And so we see 2,000 years ago bitterness within the church. We look at this guy named Paul. We talk about Paul quite a bit here at YU. It's the same Paul most of the time all the way through. And Paul was this super popular Christian figure. He was this guy who did a whole lot of really cool things. You know, maybe if you've ever seen somebody preaching about Jesus on TV, he would have been like that big, but before TVs. People knew who this guy was. But the issue with being popular to the Christians, it meant you were really unpopular to anybody who wasn't a Christian. And so Paul was loved by many, but hated by even more. And so he was a target of a lot of hate. And you might be asking, what kind of hate? Well, Paul was put into prison over and over and over again. Paul was beaten. Paul was flogged, which pretty much means he was beaten, but with a whip or a bat. Paul was stoned, not in the way that you think stoned, but instead they took a baseball-sized rock and they would throw it as hard as they could at him. A whole large group of people would do this. And they would throw rocks at him to beat him up. Oftentimes, a stoning would kill somebody, but Paul survived through all of them. Paul had the kind of fame that really you didn't want. And so Paul had every right to treat people in whatever way he wanted. Paul had every right to be mean. Paul had every right to hold stuff against them because now he wasn't just missing a football game on a Friday night. These people were trying to legitimately kill Paul and had done many physical harm things to him and thrown him in jail for no reason. And so you can only imagine how Paul probably felt in his heart. He probably felt bitter. He was mad. He didn't want to go talk to those people. He wanted to hang out with the people who liked him most. And so you'd imagine that maybe he'd write something like, avoid the people who are trying to kill you. Because that seems normal, right? But actually, he writes to the church of Thessalonica, which is a church that he was helping plant. And you can find this in 1 Thessalonians 5. He writes this. He says, make sure that nobody pays back wrong for wrong. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds like revenge, right? Because revenge is a big word. Like, you don't necessarily want revenge on somebody. Revenge can mean all kinds of different things. And so often we think of revenge as a really negative thing because overall, revenge is a really negative thing. But it doesn't necessarily mean whatever happened to you also happens to them. Paul isn't just talking about that. Paul is actually talking about not continuing a cycle of wrong. Maybe paying back a wrong for wrong looks like he never apologized, so I'm not going to forgive him. They don't deserve my forgiveness or my friendship after what they did to me. Maybe it's they didn't earn my forgiveness, and so they haven't paid for it yet. Maybe it's she hurt me so much that I'm going to hurt her. A wrong for a wrong can look a whole lot of different ways. But Paul went on to say something else. He adds on to that. Because he's not just saying, don't do bad to bad. In fact, he's saying something completely different that was so revolutionary for the time that he had to explain that he says, but always strive to do what is good for each other and for everyone else. So not only are you not supposed to do wrong to somebody who wronged you, you're not supposed to want revenge, You're not supposed to want to see them suffer, but you have not be a part of it. But actually, you're supposed to be kind back to the person who first hurt you. So for Paul, he had to be kind to the people that threw him in prison. For Paul, he had to be kind to the people who threw stones at him, for the people who flogged him, for the people who beat him. Why would Paul be nice to them? Why would you be nice to them? All you want to do is hold a grudge. But the more you hold on to a grudge, the more that grudge holds on to you. Here's the way to think about it. Maybe when you hold a grudge against somebody, in the end, it makes your everyday life harder. I guarantee you it does. Like I told you at the beginning, like there's ever little part of you that kind of likes holding a grudge, right? Like sometimes it feels good to hold something against somebody else, even though they don't know that you're still mad at them. Now, every time you do that, you hold a grudge, think about just adding weight to your body. I got these little wrist weights from Stephanie. Didn't know that they exist. But every time you hold a grudge, it's like adding weight. So say a family member of mine really ticks me off about something. I don't tell them. I'm just going to move on and just be mad at them and not say anything. Well, it's like strapping a small weight to my wrists. And then maybe I get home and I'm relaxing a little bit. I got to take this off to add this one. I'm relaxing a little bit, and all of a sudden, my wife gets home and she has 1,000 different things that she wants me to do, and I don't want to do them. I just want to relax. I had a busy day at work, and I end up not doing any of it, and she gets mad, and I get mad, and we never talk about it, and I just hold it against her. I'm adding more weight to my wrist. Now, this isn't very heavy, right? I mean, this is 1.5 pounds, I think is what it said on the other side of this. 1.5 pounds is not very heavy. I can deal with that for a really long time. And in fact, I might even enjoy it for a little bit. You know, you're like, okay, if I start throwing around an extra pound or two, like, okay, maybe I'll start getting a little bit more muscle or something. They're a little bit heavier or whatnot. But, you know, I find myself as somebody, I can speak in front of people fairly well. Doing this is not hard for me. This is part of my everyday life is trying to figure out how to speak in front of people. But when I hold this grudge, part of my everyday life, it gets harder. It gets more complicated to do. You know, all of a sudden I'm holding all these grudges against people, and this weight gets heavier and heavier. All of a sudden, this energy that I have before to do my everyday life, to do my everyday tasks, I start using it to keep holding on to these grudges. I keep using it to hold on to this bitterness in my heart against somebody because they hurt me. Now, I'm not going to go talk to them about it. Why would I do that? I'm just going to keep holding on to this. And all of a sudden, I get more and more tired. And these weights just keep weighing me down. But I don't get rid of them. Oh, it's been long enough. Like, if I brought that up now, it'd be weird, right? I can't bring this up weeks later. It would be weird. And so I keep this weight on my body, and all of a sudden, the energy that I was using for my everyday life, I start to lose it. And you just keep holding on to this weight that's on your wrists. And you see, trying to find a way to forgive somebody feels weak, doesn't it? Now, I know for a guy, oftentimes, you don't want to feel weak. And I know for women, you don't want to feel weak. But forgiving somebody, a lot of times, ends up making you feel weak. Like you're submitting to somebody else. Like even though they did you wrong, you have to say sorry. So you feel like they're not going to change because of it. Forgiveness is something that is very difficult. Forgiveness is a conscious decision to let go of someone's debt to us and not expect for them to make it up. Wow. Have you ever truly forgiven somebody? Like 100% forgiven somebody? Because I'm not 100% sure I have. Like to where it's like, you know what? I don't expect anything from you. I forgive you for what you did to hurt me, and I expect nothing in return. I am not 100% sure if I've ever done that in my life fully. Have you? And I want to be clear as we start this conversation about forgiveness, that when it comes to anything where somebody's treating you unfairly, where you may be abused or taken advantage of, that is a completely different situation than what we're talking about. Abuse is something that takes a forgiveness that is so different that I don't want you to think that that's what I'm talking about right now, that you need to walk up to an abuser and say, I forgive you, and let bygones be bygones. I fully understand that is completely different. So if you are experiencing abuse, I'm not telling you to forgive that person right now, but I am giving you permission to talk to a trusted adult about that. Talk to somebody who you trust. Because we want to get you onto a path of forgiveness, but that kind of forgiveness takes a whole lot longer than the forgiveness that it takes to forgive a friend who didn't invite you to a football game. Now, I also want to clarify about what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness is not that you aren't hurt. You might still be hurt. Forgiveness is not the other person shouldn't experience some sort of consequence. You can forgive somebody and they still get in trouble. Forgiveness is not to the other person's benefit. Forgiveness is not, it doesn't mean that the relationship has to stay the same afterwards. Forgiveness does not mean that you don't have to create any boundaries afterwards. It doesn't mean that that you are condoning or giving an excuse to whatever happened to you. Forgiveness does not mean you still have to date them. Forgiveness doesn't mean you have to stay quiet from somebody who might be hurting you. Forgiveness isn't just a magic Band-Aid that makes everything better. But forgiveness is something that can free you from the weight of bitterness. Now, if you're wondering right now if you have bitterness in your heart towards someone, maybe you're thinking, I'm not bitter whatsoever, or maybe you're thinking, I'm not bitter at all, or maybe you're thinking, oh yeah, I'm bitter, all right. But if you want to know if you're bitter towards somebody, you can ask yourself any of these questions. Here's one. Do you have arguments with somebody in your head? A lot of times where you are putting them down and you're probably pointing at them and you're yelling at them and you win the argument every single time. Guess what? That's bitterness. Are you giving a close friend or a family member the silent treatment? Maybe you normally sit next to them at YU, but right now you're sitting in a different row. You probably got a little bit of bitterness. Do you constantly subtweet people in real life or online? Wow, I said that one and people just looked at somebody. I don't know who they just looked at, but do you leave passive aggressive comments towards people? Maybe you say, it's just sarcasm. It's really passive aggressive comments. Come on, let's be honest here. Do you think of ways to get payback on somebody else, even if it happened 6 months ago? If you experience any of these things, guys, you are experiencing bitterness in your heart, and you are wasting energy to hold on to that bitterness. You have this weight that's attached to you. It makes you tired. Maybe you didn't feel it right away, but maybe it's been a month or 2 or 3, and after a while, that weight gets tiring. And it just keeps stacking on top of each other and on top of each other. And all of a sudden, you have no energy to do everything else except just be bitter. That's why people say that old people are bitter. It's because they never got rid of it, and it just kept stacking and stacking on top of it. Now they're just bitter all the time. If you want to get rid of bitterness in your life, here's 3 steps to take. 1, acknowledge your feelings. Admit that you are bitter about something. Admit that you are upset with somebody. It's okay to be hurt. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be disappointed. But pretending like your feelings aren't there isn't going to help anybody, including yourself. Number 2, don't let your feelings control you. We've talked about this one before in multiple different series. If you let your feelings control you, then you're letting your bitterness control you. And you're going to react in a way that's not going to be helpful towards you or anybody else. And finally, repeat. Do the first 2 again. Like I said, healing from bitterness and forgiveness is not this magic Band-Aid that doing it once, all of a sudden, oh, I'm good. It's going to take a while. You're going to have to acknowledge your feelings. You're going to have to not let your feelings take control. And you have to repeat it. You have to acknowledge your feelings, not let your emotions take control. You're going to have to repeat it. You have to do this over and over and over again. But soon, you can start letting go of that bitterness. And you can drop the weights off of your heart. You can get rid of what's holding you down. You can put energy back into relationships. You can put energy back into your life because you're not wasting it on feeling hurt by something that really you could just fix with a simple conversation. So as we get ready to go into our small groups, I want you to think about acknowledging your feelings. Do you have them? Do you have bitterness towards somebody? Are you hurt? It's okay. It's okay to be hurt. But we want to start building towards forgiveness so we can get beyond that hurt. Today in your small groups, you're going to have the opportunity to share some of your feelings. You're going to have the opportunity to share some of your bitterness. You might even have the opportunity to forgive somebody because they might be sitting in your group and you know, I can take care of this right now. But regardless of where you're at, guys, I want you to remember those 3 simple steps to acknowledge your feelings, don't let your emotions take control, and repeat it over and over and over again. All right, so now you're going to be able to get up and go to your small groups. If you guys don't know where to go, you can come up to me. I'd love to get you to the correct group. All sophomore girls, you're with Justice tonight. Jordan's in Hawaii. She is. Hi there. You're a freshman girl? Awesome. Well, let me turn this off so I'm not just talking in the microphone.